today, but we're not going to break the mold. I'm here with a great friend of many years, and I'll tell you about her in a second. But a lot of you that are watching the podcast have seen me interview people who've been part of the Continental Singers Ministry, part of the Continentals, as we call them. And so here today, I'm with Janet Croninger Decker. Most of you from the past may know her as just Janet Croninger. But to ask the question, even if you've never toured as a Continental singer, can you still be part of the Continental family? Yes or no?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For me, Continentals was like a giant church. And if you were in Continental Ministries, you were part of this wonderful church body. And everything about that ministry is equipping the saints.
Awesome. That's the perfect setup to my explanation. Continental Ministries, the core of the ministry, as we know, was the Continental Singers that Cam founded in the 60s. But then as it started to grow and grow fast, some new groups, some new ideas came up and new groups were added. So groups like New Hope and Act One Company, the Continental Orchestra, we had a full orchestra, a great tight vocal jazz group called Wings of Light, which I loved. And my first recording ever was to sing on the first Wings record. And then there was another really, really cool group called Intermission. One of the really beloved groups that we've had over the years is a music, comedy, and drama team called the Jeremiah People. And that's where Janet Croninger Decker comes into the picture. And so you have been a part of the Continental family and a really significant part of it. So I'm just thrilled to have you here today to talk a little bit. So
it's such a pleasure and an honor.
Talk about Jeremiah People, or JP as we called it internally. What was that experience like for you?
It really launched me into the rest of my life. Wow. My most formative years as a believer happened in Jeremiah People. I was just a kid in Alabama. I had been witnessed to by a lady. I became a believer. She drugged me to church. She was a real Jesus freak. She drugged me to church. I made a public profession, and then I was there every day when the lights were on. I was in this church, and probably 3 months after I had become a believer, I saw Jeremiah People. They came to our church, and I thought that was just the most amazing. I'd never thought about God using actors or any kind of drama or comedy. I was so limited because I didn't grow up in a church. I was limited in what I thought God would use and what God could do. The following year, when they came back again, I knew they were coming back. I decided to audition, and somehow I flew through and I got the job. So I was hired into Jeremiah People before I'd ever seen a Continentals concert. Now, once I got involved in that ministry, I understood Continentals, and because everyone else in Jeremiah People had all gone on tours, they were all ex-cons.
Yeah.
And so they had a wonderful history and a knowledge of how all this works. Jim Custer was our director, and at the end of every day, he would make us sit on the front of the bus, and he would say, tell me something that God did for you today, or that God showed you today. And we all were growing together. Everybody was older than I was, but we were just growing in the Lord together. And once we would finish these concerts, I can remember going to a place 2 years in a row. When the second year that we would come back, the people in the congregation would many, many times come up to us and say, "You saved our marriage last year.
Wow.
You changed my life. Our daughter was pregnant and we didn't know what to do. And somehow the concert that you guys brought the family together, and she hadn't spoken to her father in a year." And, there were so many of those stories that God was changing lives. But it's like going on a mission. People talk about going on mission trips and they think they're going to go and change the world, feed kids and, dig water wells and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. But what happens is they come home different. They're the ones that are changed. And that's what happened to me in Jeremiah People.
Talk a little bit about what you're doing today. There are a lot of, people that know you that haven't seen you for years or know what you're doing. Talk about that a little bit. And if your experience with JP and Continental Ministries had a part in any of that. Does it show up in what you do today, I guess is what I'm asking.
Absolutely. First of all, it prepared me for marriage, because living on the road with people is like being married. And we were on the road for 10 months out of the year for 2 years. So I was basically living with those other people. So it prepared me for marriage and to understand the give and take of that. And I never would have dreamed that I would be sitting today talking about the old days, how it prepared me. But it really, really has. And I'm so thankful that it's still preparing other kids. I'm so thankful Continental Ministries is still there. But my husband and I have 5 kids, and they've all launched beautifully. So we're extra proud. But we're all very close, and it just prepared, I think it prepared me for marriage and kids and all of that. But it's funny about what I'm doing now. I'm acting now, but I've only been acting since 2019. Of course, I did a lot of acting when I was off the road and was with Jeremiah People. That's primarily what I did.
Right.
But when Jim Custer passed away, as you know, we met in California for a memorial in the summer of 2019. I believe it was in July.
Yeah.
And I remember in this room full of people there to memorialize Jim, who was such a great influence in my life, such a great, wonderful God friend to me.
Yeah.
I saw Cam Floria. I had just this giant memory of him because he was so influential in my life.
Yeah.
And in so many of the creative things that I've gotten to do. And the first thing he said to me, he said, "Janet Croninger, heck of an actor. Are you still acting?" And I was taken aback and I thought, "No, I'm not acting." He said, "Well, that's a shame." And so then he started talking about something else. Well, it sparked in me once again, this man that I had this incredible, just, I was in awe of him no matter what he said. I just thought he was the greatest influencer. I mean, him and Hal Spencer and all those, Billy Ray Hearn and all those big, heavy batters. He was so important to me. And as I left there after this wonderful memorial and getting to see other friends and seeing you, as a matter of fact, you and Karen,
Yeah.
I thought, why am I not acting again?
Mm.
And 2 or 3 months later, I got back in an acting class and I just said, "Lord, if you really want me to do this," because I really felt like that was a message from the Lord.
Wow.
And so I found this incredible acting class. I took a couple of online intensives and classes, and I don't know how, but I got an agent. I work all the time.
That's so great.
So it's just been, to me, Cam is now influencing my life. I'm nearly 65 years old, and Cam is still pushing me to do
Still
other things.
influencing mine. Honestly, I'm privileged to say that we communicate on an almost daily basis. And of course, he's part of the CGF board, and we see each other a lot, and we're in each other's lives. And but what you described, that's Cam. That's his gift, and he's done it for so many people, me included. And sometimes if somebody ever interviews me for a roundtable, I'll tell that story, but I know how that feels. So
Yeah, he's
that's
a wonderful inspiration.
yeah, I'm so glad to hear you're acting. You are so funny. I forget what year it was. We were doing, maybe you can remember. We were recording the Jeremiah People's sketches were so creative and become so popular that the writers, and there were various writers, really brilliant writers, would create new ones, and we were recording some new vignettes. You and I and a team of people were voice acting at a little studio, I think down in Camarillo, California, and doing these comedy sketches. There's one, I think you were a lunch lady and talking about chunky chicken or something like that. So every time I see like a can that says chunk chicken on it, I think of you and the hilarity. There's several times in your life that you can remember that you cry so hard, you laugh, your side hurts. That was one of those experiences.
I could never forget that because we had to do that take 100 times.
Yeah.
We wasted more studio time trying to get those albums done.
I know it.
Because we were all I think we were using one mic, and you were supposed to be coming through a lunch line. And you said, you looked at something and you said, "I'll have some of this. What is it?" And I said, "Chunky chicken." You said, "What are the chunks?" And I said, "Well, we're praying they're croutons." And I still remember you laughing so hard we could never get that line out. But it was the old lady voice.
Yeah, it was.
Praying they're croutons. So, and every time I did it, I would try to look away, and then Bolty would be in the sound booth just
the Volty cackle,
Yeah.
when he busts out. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So funny.
That was a great experience though.
What as you look back over that experience, what are some of the sort of nuggets that are takeaways for you in terms of principles or things you learned from Jimmy Custer or Chuck or other people? What comes to your mind when you think about that?
If I didn't think I could worship God with art, I would be very stale. And I'm trying to think how to put this into words. The people that were all part of Jeremiah people and all part of Continentals and Cam and Cher and everyone that was an influence in my life, uh, they're all broken people. And if if God didn't use broken people, he wouldn't use anybody because there's nobody that's not broken. We're
Right.
still waiting for him to come back. The only one that wasn't broken, we're still waiting on it. So I think what I've taken away is that I'm broken, but that doesn't matter. God is the great fixer and the user, and he uses everyone for something. So I'm just thankful that I'm part of the arts because it really is so fulfilling to me, but it also gives me great joy because I know it's what God's called me to do.
Awesome.
But the calling has changed on my life. You know, I was called to be an actor then I
Mhm.
was called to be a wife and a mother. And when our youngest son went off to college, it was right around the time that I ran into Cam and he said, "You're not acting." Well, that's a shame. And it just, God's called me to do this again. And I'm so thankful,
Awesome.
so grateful for Continentals.
I was thinking I found a little loophole, and I think that you actually can be legitimately referred to as somebody who was part of the Continental Singers, because those of you that love the musical Dreamer, the Dove Award winning musical Dreamer, will remember an incredible actress who voiced the part of Mae East, the incredible lyrics written by Steve Taylor,
Potiphar's wife.
Potiphar's wife, in the musical Dreamer. And we did that. Those were all Continental people. And we did that at Music California was the premiere of it. And we did it at a Continental rehearsal camp. So as far as I'm concerned, by the power invested in me as the president of the Continental's Global Foundation, I hereby pronounce you a Continental.
That's awesome.
Hey, thank you for taking the time. It's so fun to talk to you. And
Oh,
I
oh,
really have such fond memories of those great performances that you guys gave as a team. I mean, that was really an amazing team that you were a part of.
yeah, that's all. It's everything under the umbrella of Continentals just seemed to be such a wonderful part of my life. And now it's blooming again because of Cam. Thank you, Cam. I love you.
Have you ever wished you could gift your life-changing Continental experience to someone else? Well, you can. Your monthly giving can make a huge impact for our teams all over the world. Did you know that this year, we'll have more than 20 Continental groups on the road, communicating in 7 different languages? The Continental story goes on, so keep writing your part of it by being on our support team. And our groups will say, "Thank you," in 7 different languages.